Good afternoon, everyone. This is Trengilly. I wanted to do a review of the graphics and user interface settings in Panzer Corps 2. I know a lot of folks have questions about them, but I haven't seen them displayed on YouTube, and they barely get a mention in the user manual. I've just jumped into a scenario so you can see what changes are available and how they impact the screen display. Right now, this is on default settings and on a 1440p monitor. I'll start with some of the basic user interface controls. There are hotkeys for all of these. You can bring up the unit menu, which has all the different units that are on the map. And so you can just hotkey that on and off. There's a hotkey to bring up the scenario instructions, which are, I keep that off because it's never very interesting. And then finally there's a hotkey to bring up the unit strength bar, and that one's really good to have up there so you can see what unit strengths are at all times. Okay. So that's the basic hotkeys to bring up and down windows. You can't control, well, the only other thing you can do is you can increase the size of the mini-map, but the mini-map is frankly pretty terrible, so I keep it as small as it'll go. You can't hide it. There is actually one additional setting. You can turn off all of the user interface. So if you hotkey that, and bingo, all the interface goes away, and then you can just play on an empty map here. So in addition to that, we then have a lot of different user interface options. So bringing up the control panel, and on the display UI, we have a lot of options. Let me get out of the way here so you can see. There we go. So there are a lot of different options under this display UI setting. You can change your scrolling speeds, mouse zooms, and that sort of stuff, but there's graphical ones like the hex grid strength. So you can make your hex grids very prominent, or you can turn them off completely if you don't want to see hexes. And you can do the same with the fog of war strength. The default is, I think it's fairly dark, so I actually like lightening it a bit more. So you can tell that it's fog of war, but you can still see everything underneath it without too much difficulty. Other things you can change are the unit sizes and strength plates. So here, for whatever reason, my default strength plates are too small to even read, so I can just scale them to whatever I find comfortable. You can turn on or off weather effects. There aren't any on this map at the moment, but if it's raining or snowing, there's, it kind of clutters the map a little bit, but you can turn that on and off if you want. Here's where you can disable dead soldiers and vehicle wrecks if you don't want those cluttering up the screen. Here's where you can change the actual size of the units. So you see as I change it here, they get considerably larger. So you can make the units quite large, which really helps in identifying which tank is what type of tank. Because when they're really small, it is hard to tell the difference between them. So I tend to keep that pretty high. You can also adjust the animation speed. That's kind of hard to show, but so right now if you drive somewhere, it's kind of a slow acceleration for the animation speed. If you go back and increase that a bit, then when you move a unit, well, that didn't look a lot different, but it does go faster. You can speed up how fast they move. What else we got? Oh, there's some other ones here. These are, let me get this over here so you can see. Okay. So there are settings for the sun position and the sun height. And if you look at the shadows over here on the left side, oops, on the left side here, you can see as we move the sun, that's sort of the sun is very low in the sky, and here it's like noon or almost noon above you. And then you can change the sort of the position of the sun, which adjusts where the shadows go. So I found that actually making the sun height very high and positioned kind of a little just behind, just over my shoulder, gets a clearer view of the units that way. And then the moving clouds You can sort of see them drifting over here. There's a little bit of shadow drifting along. Those can be switched off, and then you don't have those clouds drifting along the screen. So once you make those changes, I think it makes quite a difference to the visual impact of the whole game. You can really clearly see what's going on here now, I think, a lot better than before. There are also other options that I've used a lot. Like right here, the Stuka here looks remarkably similar to the BF-109s. So what I do with the Stuka is right away change his camouflage and swap him over to give him the winter camouflage. So now he's clearly a different plane. So I have my TAC bombers in winter camouflage, my fighters in the default, and strategic bombers are in a different one. So that makes it much easier to identify your different planes. You can also, oops, let's not move him. Oh. Why is he not going back? All right, never mind now. You can also change, there's some other camo here that adds like red or blue coloring onto the vehicles. And you can even change the insignia on the vehicles, which depending on the vehicle is easier or harder to see, but yeah, that one's not very clear. But if you take a fighter, change the insignia from the standard black and white to red and white, it's now very clearly identified, so that could be a hero fighter or whatnot. And the last thing I want to just showcase is the strategic mode. So they have a strategic mode which looks like, well, it looks like this. And you can actually play the game in this mode, but this is just horrible, okay? But this is the default setting for strategic mode. It doesn't have to be like this. So if you go back to display UI, the very end, or not at the end, here, right here, there's an option here, it defaults to showing two-dimensional units in strategic mode. If you turn that off, then it switches back to showing the regular unit models, but you keep the strategic mode map. And the strategic mode map is very clear, and so you're still in a slight three-dimensional landscape, but you've got a pretty clear map. It's not overly difficult to see where things are and to read the different numbers and whatnot. And of course you can zoom in and out on these maps to whatever your preference is. So you can use strategic map and turn off the background UI, and you've got a completely open game, so it can actually be played at this level like this. And that seems to be a slight bug, but we won't talk about that. Anyway, that's all I wanted to cover, so there you go.